My name is Marquise Watkins, and I am doing my Pechacucha on the poet William Butler Yeats, and I will be exploring his poem, When You Are Old. When you are old and gray and full of sleep and nodding by the fire, take down this book and slowly read and dream of the soft look your eyes had once and of their shadows deep. How many loved your moments of glad grace, and loved your beauty with love false or true? But one man loved the pilgrim soul in you, and loved the sorrows of your changing face. And bending down beside the glowing bars, murmur a little sadly how love fled and paced upon the mountains overhead, and hid his face amid a crowd of stars. William Butler Yeats was born in Dublin in 1865 to a chaotic yet artistic family. His father was a portrait painter, and the family moved to London when Yeats was only 2 years old. And William spent much of his childhood moving between the city and the countryside. Now, William Yeats was known for many poems, but most of them were about either political views or religious views. So it made me wonder what was the reason behind him making a love poem like such as this. Appearing in 1892, When You Are Old is one of Yeats' earliest poems. 3 years prior to its publication, he met the beautiful Maud Gonne, and as he famously said, the troubles of my life began. She was his one love, and yet she was unattainable. He proposed to her countless times, and yet she always turned him down. There always seems to be a yet in the discussion of Maud Gonne and William Butler Yeats. She married in 1903, and Yeats would go on to marry as well, yet she remained his ideal and presence in his poetry. Even though Yeats had to watch the love of his life marry someone else, he was fortunate enough to be able to turn his pain into art, being able to use what's going on in everyday life and what's really affecting him to put on paper and paint a vivid picture. As you can see in this poem, Yeats' diction changes as the poem progresses, and as the poem progresses, he paints a picture with the imagery he uses. For example, describing the woman in this story as being old and gray and informing us that she is nodding by a fire, also telling us about the soft look that the and woman's bending eyes down used to beside have. The glowing bars, murmur, a little sadly, how love fled and paced upon the mountains, far above, and hid his face amid a crowd of stars. I guess we could thank Yeats' father for his ability to paint a vivid and detailed picture with his words. Yeats continues the fiery imagery from the beginning of the poem to suggest that the flames of the woman's youth have died down to become only glowing bars. He then personifies their love as wandering around mountains and flying out to the unreachable stars, because it is lost forever. The phrase glowing bars also refers to this poem. The bars are the measures of Yeats' meters. Throughout the poem, Yeats' diction and detail have similar effects, forcing the reader out of their comfort zone by making us feel his love for a woman who just could not make herself love him back. For example, she remembers her faded beauty that was admired by many, but then remembers the only man, the narrator, that loved her for her unique soul. He loved her even as she grew less beautiful and as her being changed in the fullness of time. However, Yeats calls the old woman to murmur a little sadly about those days now that he is through with pacing upon the mountains overhead and has now hidden his face in the crowd of stars. In this poem, Yeats says, "But one man loved the pilgrim soul in you." Using figure of speech, the narrator is saying, that he loved and he understood her restless, rebellious spirit, her pilgrim soul, and continued to love her as she aged. In this poem, Yeats uses an ABBA rhyme scheme, meaning the first line in the stanza rhymed with the last line in the stanza, and the two middle lines rhymed. For example, how many loved your moments of glad grace, and loved your beauty with love false or true? But one man loved the pilgrim soul in you, and loved the sorrow of your changing face. The tone of this poem was a sad one, yet full of love. As you can see throughout the poem, that the narrator loves the person who was reading the story, as Yeats loved Maud Gone. But yet, it was a love battle that was not won. I believe this poem is a universal poem, seeing that having loved someone and having them not love you back can happen to anyone, no matter what person you are, your race, how old you are, anything. It can happen to anyone. In conclusion, this poem is something that Yeats knew all too well, with losing his love with Maud gone and watching her marry someone else. But he was able to turn his pain into art and paint a beautiful, vivid picture to display for all of generations. And this is Marquise Watkins, and I want to thank you for watching my presentation.